Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Susan Mims, the Interim CEO for Dogwood Health Trust. For those of you who are not familiar with us, I wanted to let you know a little bit about Dogwood. We were created a few years ago for the purpose to dramatically improve the health and well-being of the people and communities in the 18 counties and the Qualla boundary of Western North Carolina. In 2020, our board identified 4 strategic priority areas that will have a big impact on the health and well-being of people in Western North Carolina. And those are housing, education, economic opportunity, and health and wellness. And they are all undergirded by a deep commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So in a nutshell, we are helping to create a region where every generation can live, learn, earn, and thrive, no exceptions. So in terms of housing, which is why you're all here with us today, we know that where you live has a huge impact on your overall health and well-being. A safe and stable home allows individuals and families to put down roots in a community and improve their access to education, employment, and health services, and live healthy lives. I know this personally as a physician. Taking care of patients, was talking to one of my youngest patients who I was talking to about dental care. And when I talked to her, she said that she couldn't brush her teeth. And I asked why not. And she said there was no place to spit in the back of the station wagon, which was her home. And that really made an impression on me of how anything I did as a practicing physician just wasn't going to have the impact without addressing all of these drivers of healthcare, which is why we're doing this work today. So as we began our investments in the community in housing back in 2020, we realized that both we and the communities would benefit from a deeper knowledge about the gaps in safe and affordable housing and really understanding how deep these were. So we commissioned a study from Bowen National Research, which has a strong track record of exploring and sharing specific housing data. The data we received was very eye-opening, to say the least, and I think it's shown a light on many aspects of affordable and workforce housing in our Western North Carolina region. So for Dogwood, the findings in this report informed our newly released goals and objectives that will inform our community investments over the next several years. You can find a link in the chat where you can review those at your convenience. I believe that's getting put in the chat as we speak. So, and addressing our region's housing needs goes far beyond the capabilities of any one foundation or not-for-profit or government agency. So it's really important that we all come together. And it will take all of us analyzing this information and working towards creative solutions. So that's why Dogwood is delighted to host this session. And we're so glad that you all have joined us today to connect directly to the source, to hear for yourselves what this research shows. We'll get more into the data in just a minute, but I want to point out that you can download the Bowen report from our website for free. And I believe, can we stick that link in the website in the chat as well? So you all can get the full version of this report as well as the executive summary to use however it helps toward the purpose that we're all here sharing. We encourage you to download it, review it, share it widely to really work on improving housing in our region. So now it is my pleasure to introduce you to Patrick Bowen, who is the founder and president of the Bowen National Research. In 2010, after 14 years of real estate research, Patrick, along with 8 other individuals, joined together to launch Bowen National Research. Today, they are a nationally recognized organization that helps others make well-informed, data-driven strategic decisions. They are an active member of the National Council of Housing Market Analysts, ensuring that their studies meet market analyst industry's highest standards. But even more than that, affordable housing was a personal issue to Patrick. Many years ago, he secured affordable housing to start a life with his young family. It set him on a course to become the principal advocate for housing industry. So Patrick understands the important role that safe and affordable housing played in his own life and has committed himself and the efforts of his staff to providing essential market research that helps secure affordable housing for others. As you listen to Patrick's presentation, I encourage you to share any questions that you have in the chat. We'll have a chance to review those when Patrick finishes, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. Patrick, we're just so happy that you have worked with us on this study and to have this really helpful information. And so happy you could be with us today to share this with our Western North Carolina community. I'll turn it over to you, Patrick.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mims. That's very kind of you. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share a screen. And if somebody could let me know that you all see it.
I can see it, Patrick. Let me see if I know I have a different view. So I'm gonna, let's see if somebody can stick in the chat that they can see it. Yes, we are getting confirmation. You're free to go. Yep.
All right, here we go. Well, I appreciate you all having me here to present, which something that's been in the works for probably roughly 2 years. I believe I met with the Dogwood folks actually about 20 months ago to have the initial conversation about conducting some kind of housing needs assessment in Western North Carolina. I think we actually got commissioned to do the work about 1 year ago, so almost exactly a year ago. And most of the research and analysis that our firm did would have been in the first 6-7 months of 2021. And then we issued a draft in the late summer of this year, and then began with presentations in September. And here we are today. So it's been a long journey, a lot of information, a lot of help along the way. One of the things that we're very proud of, and everyone actually in the region should be very proud of, is the fact that I think we attempted to reach out to more than 1,000 stakeholders, community representatives, employers, economic development representatives, housing authorities, planning departments, supportive service providers, on and on and on. And I think in the end, we made more than 600 points of contact in the region. So a lot of people helped us to further understand a region that we had a pretty good grasp of. We've studied housing in the region for close to a decade in some capacity. So a lot of people should get credit for this effort. And again, very proud of what we've done. So let's jump in. Scope of work. Dogwood provided us specific things they want us to cover. And obviously we gave input on, I think, areas of focus that should be part of this analysis. So we defined study areas. I'll show you exactly what we studied: demographics and economic, a ton of information that we collected. You'll only see a fragment of that today, particularly on the demographic side. We'll hit on some of the key highlights. Housing supply, probably unprecedented in the state of North Carolina in terms of the amount of information we collected, particularly on the rental side. You're going to see a really robust survey of rental housing, but also I think a good analysis and representative data on the for sale housing market. We covered a lot of other things that we won't go into here today, but I'll briefly touch on them just to acknowledge what is in the report that's not in the presentation. We got a lot of good community input, whether it was stakeholders, employers, or some of the other foundations in the area. We did look at special needs or hard to house populations. And so I'll have one slide on that here today, but the study actually has a really robust bit of information and a section dedicated to kind of special needs population, whether it's the homeless, disabled, and folks like that. Probably one of the big takeaways or one of the best uses of this study is the housing gap estimates. And then I'll talk you through that here towards the end of this presentation. But essentially, that's giving you where quantitatively, what is the housing need, whether it's rental or for sale housing across each of the 18 counties, as well as the Indian reservation that was part of the study region. And then I won't go through our action plan recommendations. Ultimately, Dogwood will move forward with whatever they believe are priorities for the region. A couple of things to point out. One, you're going to see some 2020 census data in here. I apologize, 2020 data demographics in here. That is not the 2020 census. For those that know, and don't know, I guess, the 2020 census has had many delays. And so they initially issued some data in September, but it's very limited. So all the information we have in the report would be 2020 estimates based on various demographic providers and American Community Survey. So when you see 2020, that is not the US Census. That's an important thing to point out. One other thing to pay attention to too is this study was commissioned by and written for Dogwood. So the foundation had specific goals and objectives they want us to cover. This study did not get into things like local housing policies, zoning, development cost, availability of land, many things that would affect the ability to build housing, particularly affordable housing. Those things aren't covered in this study. Again, this was a specific task that we were given by Dogwood, but it's still, I think, very, very helpful and robust information that I think you're going to find useful. Oops. All right, things that are in the study that we're not covering today, really in any detail. Community input. So we do have some really good information from various groups. That is in the report. Special needs population. I'll show you which groups we are covered in the report, but there's a whole section dedicated to the special needs populations. Individual county profiles. If you are someone that only cares about Henderson County, there is a specific section dedicated to Henderson County that provides you demographics, economic and housing supply information, as well as housing gap information. The stuff I'm going to cover today is comparing all 18 counties and the Indian Reservation together and talk about the region as a whole. But if you care about one specific area, the study's got a piece dedicated just for you. We also have information on the Eastern Cherokee or Qualla boundary throughout the report. You won't see a lot of that here today just because of the nuances and unique characteristics of the reservation. We don't have a lot of that stuff presented here today. And there's other things that we do not include in this presentation, but the study is just packed with just wonderful information covering a lot of topics that I think will be very helpful. All right, study areas, the 18 counties. This is Dogwood's footprint as well as Eastern Cherokee Reservation. The first thing I'll show you here is just renter household income characteristics and trends. The top graph is showing you renter households by income in the year 2020. The dark blue is the study region as a whole. The lighter blue is the state of North Carolina, just to give you some kind of comparison. And as you can see, most of the households are lower income, at least renter households are lower income households making less than 40 or even a large share less than $30,000 a year. That's important to keep in mind as you look at the next graph below that. That's the change projected over the next 5 years, or at least during this 5-year projection period of renter households by income. And as you can see, the top part of that graph shows a lot of the household growth is going to be among those that make over $40,000 a year. I caution folks when they see something like this to say, okay, well, you have a decline of lower income households, and I could talk at length about this particular trend. This is normal to see declines in lower income households across the United States, but particularly a market that's dominated by rural markets. You have a lot of folks leaving rural areas of the United States for many reasons. And so you do see these declines. You have people that are getting married. And so it's two households that make $25,000 a year. They fall into one of the lower income brackets, but they are projected, particularly millennials, they're projected to get married. They double up their income, and now they went into another higher income segment. They never left the area. They're there, but it's going to show a decline in one segment and an increase in another. So tons of nuanced trends that happen to kind of back the data that you see in front of you. But the point is, you got a lot of low income households, and I'll show you here later in the presentation that while they may be declining in number, the need is significant because many of these people are living in housing they either can't afford or they just honestly shouldn't be living in due to quality issues. And then we did the same thing for owner households as expected. Most of the characteristics for the region are similar to the state of North Carolina. Most of your owner households make over $60,000 a year. Most of the growth projected up through 2025 will be those that make over $60,000 a year. But again, you've got a lot of folks, the homeowners that are living in housing they shouldn't be or can't afford. And so while you see declines among lower income households, there's still a need for affordable housing for people that want to purchase a home, particularly first-time home buyers. You will see they have nothing to choose from across the region. Our median household income by every individual county, the darker colors, this is the map on the left, darker colors represent the higher median household income. And as you would expect, towards the center part of the region, closer to Buncombe and Henderson and Transylvania counties, Haywood County, you have some of the higher income households. And then you see on the right map, map on the right, again, darker shades showing greatest growth. Now the growth is kind of projected all over the place. Every county, with few exceptions, are going to have double-digit increases in median household income. So household income growth will be positive for the region. But as I'll explain a little bit later, it won't keep up with rising housing costs. We all know folks live in poverty. This is based on federal poverty levels, 125,000 people. Keep that in mind, 125,000 people, almost 15% of the people that live in the region live in poverty across the region. And we marked in the map on the left, darker shades of blue, showing the highest concentration of poverty. And it really is in the more rural parts of the county. But even in places like Buncombe, you're still talking, or even Henderson, you're talking double-digit poverty rates. And maybe more telling or heartbreaking, I guess, is the child poverty rates. You've got, I think, one in 5 children living in poverty. And again, it's some of the more rural counties where child poverty is the greatest. If I had to kind of flag a few slides that maybe were most critical, that doesn't mean poverty isn't critical or some of the other things I've shown you. This is probably one of the most telling things. And I highlighted in the red numbers and in the green numbers, essentially the number of hours that somebody has to work to be able to afford a 2-bedroom unit at fair market rent, which is a fairly established rent amount. And you can see that, you know, whether you're somebody working at the typical renter wage in the area, you're going to have to work, you know, anywhere from, in most parts, over 50 hours, in some cases 90 hours. If you're somebody working at minimum wage, that's the red numbers. Look at the amount of hours you have to work. This is a single wage earner household. So certainly if you have 2 households that are earning income, even those, you know, some of those are going to have to work overtime or a second job to make ends meet. So again, affordability in terms of those folks that are working a bulk of your jobs, and particularly those are tied to, you know, the service industry, they have a tough time making ends meet. And we'll show you that here in a second further. Minority statistics. There's a section dedicated in the report. This is the only slide I have on it, but we do dedicate at least several pages and data sets to folks that are minorities to illustrate some of their challenges. But really the big takeaway here is the table at the bottom. You can see minorities that earn less than $30,000. That's 36% of, again, 36% of all minorities earn less than $30,000. When you compare that to whites alone, again, not mixed race or anything, just whites, that share is lower. And that has a consequence in terms of what people can afford. And you can see on the far right side of that table, you got fewer minorities that are homeowners relative to the white population. So, you know, again, we cover these things and we cover availability and other factors throughout the study, but certainly minority population and have some challenges with housing equity and even wage earning. Overall household data, a lot on this table, but I highlighted a couple that I wanted to make sure that I at least bring some attention to during the presentation. And that is the first 2 sets that I've got highlighted under the change in 2010 to 2020. This is number of households either increasing or decreasing during this period. And I highlighted in green those areas that have grown. And I highlighted in, I guess, the light red or pink areas that are actually have declined over the last decade. And this really isn't going to change much. These trends should continue over the next, at least through 2025 in terms of areas that are declining. It's the more rural counties on the periphery of the region for the most part. And then areas like Buncombe and Haywood and Henderson, areas that are expected to grow. So you're still going to have a lot of growth, and we'll talk about that in one second. You'll have a lot of growth. You're going to need additional housing to kind of keep up with this growth in most parts of the region. And then just again, pulling from that previous table, I wanted to show a map just to kind of give you some kind of spatial representation of where the growth is going to occur percentage-wise. Buncombe and Henderson, the more populated areas will grow in numbers the greatest, but even percentage-wise, you can see that a lot of the growth is towards the center part of the region. And we have a lot of data involving households by age groups within the study. But for this presentation, I just wanted to show you this one particular one. There are two waves that are going through the United States in terms of households by age. And the Western North Carolina area is no different than much of the nation. You've got older millennials, those that are, at least for this projection period, by 2025, many of them will be 44 years old. That group, 35 to 44, is one of the big groups that are increasing in the region. And so we mapped percentage-wise and showing in dark blue those areas that will show the greatest growth. And you do have some counties that will, experience some decent growth among these households. And certainly as these groups grow, again, it could be some of them getting married and having kids. That'll affect the housing needs of the region and within the individual counties. We also have the other wave going through that we all are aware of, the baby boomers, those at 65 and older. And you could see most of that growth is more centralized towards the Buncombe area in the central part of the region. And so again, and many of these will be obviously people that will relocate to the area, but a lot of it's folks that are aging in place. And so as these folks age in place, their housing needs are going to change. Many will require, want to downsize or need housing with services, supportive services and things like that, maintenance-free living, whether it's condos or apartments. So you'll see that kind of trend grow in the years ahead, just due to these changes in households by age groups. All right, this is the share of renter households on the left, owner households on the right. These are 2020 estimates. The dark blue is the greater concentrations. And as you would expect, Buncombe County is one of the higher shares for renters. That's not unusual for a more developed area. And Jackson County, because of the university over there, obviously has a higher share of younger people and renters. And then on the right side, you see the owner household share. And now it's almost flipped, where you get more homeowners in the more rural areas. And that is large measure due to the difficulty of developers being able to get into some of these rural communities and be able to develop rental housing, particularly multifamily housing on any kind of scale. So no surprises here. This might be another thing that I would flag and kind of pay attention to as I take you through this. This is renter household growth 2020 through 2025. These projections are provided by ESRI, the national demographic firm. That's very reliable, and folks use them all across the country. Even government entities, municipalities use ESRI for their demographics, including the projections. And as you can see, you have renter household growth of approximately 6,500 households expected over this 5-year period, and over 11,000 among homeowners. So as I take you through some of this stuff, and I'm going to show you the lack of available housing, lack of affordable housing, and other quality of housing. If you forgot all that for just a moment and just looked at growth alone, just to keep your heads above water, or just tread water where you're at, and you have a housing shortage, you have some major housing challenges. If nothing changes, you need to add roughly 18,000 housing units over this 5-year period just to keep where you're at. And that's not going to solve the problem. But I want folks to understand, renovating, rehabilitating, preserving existing housing absolutely is a priority. But you got to add to your housing stock because you've got growth continuing to come. It's not going to stop. And so these numbers kind of show that. Next few slides will be very similar. I'll go through these quickly. This is the first 3 will be renter households by different income levels. Then the next 3 will be, after that will be homeowner households by income level. So this is renter households that make less than $30,000 a year. This is 2020 estimates. On the left-hand side of the share of households that make these lower income amounts. And as you can see, most of them are on the outer edges along the Tennessee and North Carolina border and in the more rural areas of the market. And then the decline that's projected, that's again, I showed you earlier, the decline in renter households among some of the lower income households, but you can see where is the exodus, and it's in these more rural parts of the county while the center part of the region is, I'm sorry, more rural parts of the region. But the center part of the region, Buncombe and Madison and Haywood, will see minimal changes among these lower income households. Still, even with these declines, I'm going to just reiterate again, we still have a need for affordable housing for the lowest income households. These are households, renter households that make between $30,000 and $59,000. And the shares on the left, darker shades show the higher concentrations. So now it's spread out a little bit more relative to the last one you saw. And then where are the changes expected to occur over the 5 years? You can see on the right up through 2025. And most counties will see some kind of increase with a few exceptions in Haywood and Transylvania County. And by the way, one of the things to keep in mind for everyone, the projections are based on a grouping of various demographics and economic and housing trends, both historical and then what's happening state level, nationally, rural markets, urban markets. But obviously, if a local municipality or an individual county government begins to make changes in policies and incentives, that can shift some of these trends that you'll see. And so keep it in mind that these are not set in stone, and you do have, each individual community does have some control over how much they will grow, what type of growth will they see. Obviously, attracting major employers will affect the type of growth that could occur. But assuming that things, no significant changes occur in local policies, no national crisis economically or health-wise that we saw with COVID, then these would be reasonable to assume these trends are going to materialize. This is renter households making over $60,000 a year. And keep in mind, this study focused heavily on those that make roughly under 100% of area median income, but we still want to show some of the higher income households because they are part of the fabric of each one of these communities. So those households that, again, renter households that make over $60,000, the highest concentration towards the center part of the region and near Buncombe, which is not surprising. And then where's the growth expected to occur? Every county will see some kind of growth among these higher income households, but you can see in the darker blue, the counties that will see the greatest change. So we do the same thing for owner households. These are the lowest income owner households. On the left is the share, on the right, the change. As you can see, much of the same trends that we showed for the renter households. Those that make between $30,000 and $59,000, again, share on the left map, changes on the right. This is owner households that make over $60,000 a year. A significant amount of growth projected among these households, and again, concentrated more towards the center part of the region. The growth is projected to occur, though, really all across the board. But some of the more rural counties will see are expected to see some of the greatest growth percentage-wise. All right, this is the only slide we have in here in terms of special needs population. We covered 9 groups that we were asked to cover. Actually, I think we were asked to cover fewer. I think we added a couple on our own as we started to learn a little bit more about some of these populations and getting feedback from folks. The point to make out of this, while it shows 280,000 people that fall under one of these categories, keep in mind that some of these people can have dual issues. And so somebody with physical disability could also be somebody that's in a single parent household or have a substance abuse disorder or something like that. So some people are getting counted multiple times. So the thing to keep in mind, or at least the takeaway from this, is those that have the disabilities, whether it's physical or mental disability, developmentally disability, mental illness, single parent households, some of these numbers are quite large. And they're obviously, when we did our research, through the many stakeholders that we've talked to and inventorying housing, there really isn't a lot of housing that is dedicated for the special needs population. And in many populations, in many cases, these folks can't find housing that specifically serve their needs. And so there clearly is a housing shortage. There is for special needs populations. There is a section in the study itself dedicated exclusively to this and goes into detail and to every one of these groups that I think you'll find useful. But in the end, there's just not enough housing to match with the degree of need for each one of these groups. I have a few slides here. This is actually, for me personally, is one of the most fascinating parts. I'm not sure everyone will share my interest in this, but I think it is important. And you all know, and the people are coming to the area from out of state. In this case, and this is out of, I'm going to show you intrastate, meaning within the state patterns, but this is interstate, between states. You can see on the map on the left, where are when the people come into the area, where are they going? And they're primarily going into the center part of the region: Buncombe, Henderson, Haywood, Jackson, Transylvania, Madison, McDowell, places like that along the I-40 corridor. So really in the central part is where the initial place where folks come from when they come from out of state. Where are they coming from? Places like Florida, California, areas like that. And with COVID, one of the things we're learning, it's happening really all over the Southeast and markets we're studying, both in North and South Carolina. You've got a lot of folks coming from the mid-Atlantic states, in part because, and other parts of the country, but in part because of COVID and the ability to now work from home. Asheville is a fantastic place. That Western North Carolina is a fantastic place to live. And if you have the opportunity to work there, but still keep your job in Baltimore, New York, or wherever, you can see why folks would want to come here. So you're starting to see that kind of trend happen all over the country, where people are gravitating towards places they've always wanted to live, but they couldn't do it because of their jobs. Now they can because of remote working. Okay, this is now within the state. Where are people coming from? So this is people that are moving in. This is by county. We shaded the darker blues. And Caldwell County, Cleveland County, two of your adjacent counties to the region, are two of your big contributors that are folks coming in. But then there's many other parts of the state, obviously, that they're coming from: Randolph, Brunswick, Pitt, places like that. Brunswick, a high growth county, but still they got folks that are coming over to your region. So you have a lot of folks coming in. I'll show you here in a second incomes and age of who's coming here to the region. But this at least tells you got folks coming from all over the state, but really some of the counties that are closest to you is where they're originating. Just as important, to know where they're coming from, or where are they going. So this map here shows you in the darker reds where folks are leaving in the greatest numbers. And in this case, it's Catawba County, Mecklenburg, and then some of the other more developed areas, like just over by Raleigh. And again, Mecklenburg with Charlotte, these are normal trends. We see this all over the country where folks are leaving maybe more rural areas and less developed areas. I showed you earlier the declines of some of the more rural counties within your region. A lot of those folks are going to the bigger metropolitan areas for multiple reasons, but a lot of times it's for social, cultural, employment opportunities, education opportunities, and things like that. This is happening all over the United States. So the Western North Carolina is no different in seeing this kind of migration pattern. All right, so the folks that are coming into the area, who are they? The map on the left is the per person income. Again, keep in mind it's per person, not a household. So some of these might be individuals, but some of them may be multiple wage earners, a husband and wife or whatever, two roommates coming into the area. But this is the per person income on the map. Darker areas show the higher incomes. So most of the higher income folks are coming towards the central part of the region, while the lower income households are going towards the outskirts. And to a degree that makes sense, right? It's where is housing affordable? And so if you are a low wage earning person, you're going to go to where housing is more affordable. And in most cases, it's in the more rural parts of the county. The region. And then on the right-hand side, it shows you a map of median age, and darker is showing the oldest median ages, lighter colors represent the lower median ages. One of the things that probably for me, and I would suspect for a lot of the folks that are watching this, I know that the belief has been, and it's true, but the belief has been that a lot of people that are coming to the area are retirees. Well, the highest share of folks that coming to your area are those that are age 55 and older. But that's a third of those that come into the area, move into the area. And you've got over half, though, that are between the ages of 18 and 54. So you do have a lot of younger people You have a lot of working age folks. You got a lot of people with kids. As you can see, 15% of the people that move in the area are under the age of 18. So while the perception is you've got a lot of seniors coming to the area, you still, the bulk of the folks that are coming in are those that are lower waged earners, as I showed you on the preceding slide. And now you also understand a lot of them are not seniors. And so that obviously affects the dynamics of your housing needs, both now, but in the years ahead. So you saw earlier the demographics of the area, and I showed you the growth, and I mentioned and stressed the importance of adding new housing. Well, let's set aside now growth, and let's just talk about the people that are there now in terms of what they can afford and what kind of quality of housing they're in. This is housing cost burden households. So these are folks that are paying over 30% of their income towards their housing costs. As a federal definition, basically it's indicating that these people are paying a disproportionately high share of their income towards housing. On the left-hand side is the renter households, right-hand side is owner households, and you have over 46,000 renters that are cost burden, representing a share of about 42%. That's about identical to the state average, but it's a big number if you think of it that way. And in terms of the homeowners, you've got 49,000 owner households that are cost burden. And we show by the darker shades on the map where those concentrations are, but it really is across the entire region. So affordability is a major challenge for folks. And particularly if I were to break this out, we did not do it in the study, but if I were to break this out by income levels, I suspect if I picked those that make less than $30,000 a year as an example, we would have much, much higher shares. Maybe in some cases, over 50, 60, 70% of the households would be defined as cost burden, because those lower income households just have a disproportionately high share of them being cost burden. So affordability is a major challenge in addition to the growth issues that your region faces. All right, substandard housing. So essentially getting to quality of housing. And here, this is the renter households that are living in overcrowded housing. And overcrowded housing is defined by units that have 1.01 or more persons per room. So think of it as per room, not bedroom. A lot of people think it's per bedroom. So that really stresses further the fact that these are truly, genuinely overcrowded households. So on the left-hand side, you have over 5,500 renter households that are overcrowded, representing 5% of all renter households. That's higher than the state average. On the right-hand side, you have owner households, 3,900, 1.5% of all owner households are living in overcrowded housing. That's also slightly above the state average. So a lot of folks living in housing that are overcrowded, and much of this is due to economic reasons, certainly for folks that just can't afford to maybe move out. And so maybe their adult children are staying with them longer than they might normally do so. And again, part is affordability, but also availability or lack of available housing in the region. Substandard housing, believe it or not, in our great country, we still have a lot of folks living in housing they should not be living in. In this case, these following federal definitions, these are units that lack complete kitchen or plumbing. We broke it out by renter on the left, owners on the right. You have over 1,700 or 1.6% of renters are living in the substandard housing, over 2,100, almost 2,200 owner households, representing 8% of all owner households. That's above the state average of 0.5%. So again, disproportionately high share of folks living in substandard housing. And it's kind of scattered throughout the region. There's not necessarily a distinct trend, particularly on the renter side. You've got the urban areas that have it, but you also have many of the rural areas that have substandard housing conditions, particularly on the renter side. If I were to flag another part of this presentation, I would say this is probably one of those. This is the multifamily rental housing side. And this is basically generally anything that was over 20 units, although we may have lowered the bar on some properties in the more rural counties to catch those. We surveyed 331 multifamily apartments across the 18 county region, as well as the Indian Reservation. And I think I had said this earlier, almost in the very beginning of this presentation, This is really unprecedented, I think, at this level to get this level of detail on multifamily housing in the state of North Carolina. And so the big takeaway from this is whether you look at the occupancy table, that very first table, the occupancy column of 99.1%, or the opposite of that, the vacancy rate 0.9%. You really want to have a vacancy rate for a healthy market at least 4%. You're under 1%. So there's clearly a rental housing shortage among the multifamily rentals. The table on the right really hits home that we broke it out by every one of the counties that we studied, whether it was the overall vacancy rates or by the individual product types, whether it's market rate, tax credit, or government subsidized. And I shaded in red anything that had nothing, no vacancies. And there's a lot of red on that table. So there's a lot of counties, virtually every county has some kind of challenge, but a lot of counties are in serious trouble in terms of availability of the multifamily housing. I'll show you here in just a moment the wait list and the pent-up demand for affordable housing, but even the market rate has some pent-up demand for it. So a significant shortage of multifamily rental housing. And based on our experience of particularly the last 7 years of studying parts of the region, this has been an ongoing problem. It's just more pronounced now. So this is overall, again, regardless of the program type that the multifamily property operates as. And as you can see, a lot of gray on there, meaning there's nothing available. But even the light blue is, I think, less than 0.5%. And with few exceptions, there really isn't much available. McDowell County, that is actually one property that drove that up to 7.9%. That was a new project that was in the development, that had just recently opened. When we surveyed this market, when I followed up in September, or my staff followed up in September, that individual project was fully occupied and had a significant wait list. So if I were to update this right now, McDowell County has nothing available. So the problem continues here in the back half of 2021. All right, so market rate rentals. Now, I marked on this affordable because one of the things we wanted to do on behalf of Dogwood was kind of move aside or set aside anything that was high-end rentals. While we didn't have a definition for that, we tried to look at product that was generally affordable to households that make up to about 100% of area median income. So there are properties we did not survey that we are aware of, but again, it would typically be luxury upscale type rentals or even student rentals we excluded from this. So these are truly affordable market rate rental product. And you could see, again, mostly gray areas indicating no vacancies, the blues showing some vacancies, but they're all incredibly low. And we showed the rents on the table on the right. In the more rural areas, the rentals might be close to $600. In the more developed areas, those median rents are typically around $1,100. Most folks can't afford those. I showed that in the red print underneath the table. Again, stressing the importance that affordable housing really is a major challenge among all spectrums, but even within the market rate side. So tax credit apartments. These are projects that operate under the low-income tax credit program, serving households up to 80% of area median, roughly for a 4-person household in this region. That would be a household income close to about $60,000. Some of the more rural counties that have lower incomes, that might be closer to $50,000. But nonetheless, this is serving a segment that's kind of below the traditional affordable market rate workforce housing. And as you can see here, virtually nothing available. I mentioned McDowell County before. It's now full, so that's now a 0 on McDowell County. So we're down to Buncombe County. If nothing else has changed in the last 5, 6, 7 months since we surveyed this market, there's the only thing you got left is Buncombe County in terms of tax credit available units, and there's very little of that left. Part of the reason is look at the rents on the right-hand side. They're really affordable rents compared to market rate products, so you can see why there's such a demand for this product. Government subsidized, serving households up to 50% area median. So generally for the area, that's a 4-person household that makes up to about $30,000 a year. The map shows, again, not much color, meaning there's just not much available. And it doesn't matter what county you're in. There's limited availability. And overall, in fact, I'm going to go to the next slide because this slide does reference the wait list, but I do have that here. So we'll show it for all of them. So this is probably another thing I'd flag if I was to talk about, what's the big takeaways, and that is there's a significant pent-up demand. Now, it's not abnormal for us to see wait lists at government subsidized projects. You have 2,300 people waiting to get a government subsidized unit. Virtually every county has some kind of wait list for that type of product. Even the tax credit, over 1,800 people waiting to get a unit. So again, a lot of pent up demand for tax credit housing. But even the market rate, this affordable market rate, you have over 1,300 people waiting to get something that is affordable to those that can't qualify for a unit under the tax credit program or under a government subsidy. So pent up demand across the entire affordability spectrum and across the entire region. So significant pent up demand for multifamily rentals. This will be another one that I would flag in terms of a key finding, particularly the next slide I'll show you in a second. One of the areas of stress, or at least Dogwood had asked me to look into and to focus on, was voucher use. And I'm glad that they pointed us this way. We do look at voucher usage and properties that will accept them, but not to the level that we did for Dogwood. This is unprecedented for our firm, but I think it was incredibly telling. Essentially, the takeaway is, less than 45% of the surveyed properties will accept a housing choice voucher, which is issued by the Public Housing Authority to help a tenant subsidize their rents. So problem one, not a lot of properties will accept it, less than half. And so if you're somebody that has a voucher, you're already limiting your possibilities to 50% of the inventory that might take your voucher. But let's see how many people actually use the voucher. So this is voucher usage by county. And the first group I circled is unused voucher share. You can see some of these counties over 40%, 50%, 60% of the vouchers that are issued are not being used. And in total, it's over 2,500 households, 2,500 households that have a voucher that can't use them. And the wait lists for these vouchers are long. And the challenges that a lot of the folks are finding is one of the things I showed you just a few moments ago, and that is the lack of available housing. So even if there's a property out there that accepts a voucher, the chances are that they don't have anything available. And so your voucher can't be used there. So you struggle to find a place that will be able to use the voucher. This is a major, major challenge. And while we didn't quantify it, if you were to assume that the government's portion of a rent might be $200 a month towards a tenant's rent, times that 2,500 unused vouchers, you're talking millions, close to $6 million in federal funds that could come into the area. There's no program you have to set up. The program exists, the funding exists, the money is there. It's just not coming in because you don't have places for people to use their vouchers. This is a major challenge for the area, and something that should obviously be a priority for the region. Let me hurry through some of this stuff here. Non-conventional rentals, this is anything that's not an apartment. So if it's a mobile home, single family home, duplex, whatever it is, the big takeaway is while there's 164 of these, and my staff looked hard to find these, 164 non-conventional rentals that are available, it represents 0.2%. And as I said earlier, you want about 4% to be available. There's just nothing available in terms of the non-conventional rentals. But even if you were lucky to find one and you were a voucher holder or just a low-income household, most of these properties have rents well over $1,000. So the voucher probably will not be able to be used there. Or again, if you're a low-income household that doesn't have a voucher, chances are you can't afford one of these non-conventional rentals. So the rental side is hitting renters twofold. It's on the multifamily side, challenges, as well as non-conventional side. For sale housing, you all are aware, as not just for your area, but probably across the country, you are aware. Home prices are escalating at historically fast rates, and your region is no different. Over the last, basically from 2017 up to 2020, and all of our data for historical sales stopped at the end of 2020, so that we could have a full year of data. And home prices have gone up $90,000 during this period, or 36%. I can assure you that household incomes are not going up, have not gone up 36% in the area. So the gap in terms of affordability of for sale housing is getting greater and posing a greater challenge for a lot of low income households. So this shows you the change. I showed you on a map on the left. Some of the counties we didn't have enough data that I felt comfortable to draw conclusions on. So those counties that we did have enough historical sales data, We did show those on the map as well as in the table, but you can see a lot of counties have some significant household housing price increases, in some cases 50% or more. Burke, McDowell, Madison showing significant increases. So housing prices going up and household income wages cannot keep pace. How about the available supply? A couple things to take away from this. I circled availability rate. Availability rate simply means if I took the available units that are there, somebody could purchase, not a pending sale or any of those kind of things. These are truly, if I wanted to get a house right now, put a bid on it, what is available compared to the number of owner-occupied households, that is an availability rate. For a healthy market, you want that to be close to 2 or 3%. In this market, you can see, and I shaded in the pink part of those cells, anything under 1%. So you have a majority of the counties do not have even 1% of that inventory available when it really should be at least over 2. And so just like your rentals inventory where you have a lack of availability, you have the same challenge here in virtually every county across the region. Look at the median prices that I encircled too across every one of those counties. The median for the region is $399,000. Many counties shaded in red, well over $500,000. So you can imagine, and I'll show you here in a second, the availability by different price segments, but you can imagine that for lowest income households, the odds of them finding something would be difficult. So again, just showing you on a map, the available inventory by number of homes available. Buncombe, because it's the biggest and has the largest inventory, would have the most homes. And others that are large, have shaded in blue, would have the most inventory. But then I switched it over on the right-hand side to show availability rates. And it's actually some of while those counties may have the largest number of homes available, their shares of what is available are some of the lowest. This will be another one that I would flag as a key finding from this report. And you can see on here, those homes that are available under $200,000, essentially, and it's those first two groupings on the table, represent 14.5% of the entire available inventory. In some cases, some of those counties, it's under 10% of the inventory is available for the lowest income household. So if you're a first-time home buyer that can only afford something up to $200,000 or something less than, obviously, you don't have too much to choose from. And we're seeing this all over the country. And in fact, when I was in Asheville 2 years ago to present on a 4-county regional study, including Buncombe County and its surrounding area, one of the areas of concern was the shrinking inventory of the homes that were priced between $200,000 and $299,000. And at that time, I said, look, the inventory under 200 is shrinking dramatically. If you bring me back in a few years, I predict I'm going to show you a chart that demonstrates your inventory between $200,000 and $299,000 is gone or shrinking. Now, I don't have a slide for that today. This morning, I ran through the numbers. And just 2 years ago, in the 4 counties of Buncombe, Henderson, Madison, and Transylvania, you had about 500, 600 homes priced between $200,000 and $300,000. Today, that number is down to 105. That inventory has shrunk by 80%. So while a lot of conversations focuses on the lowest income households and those that can afford up to $200,000, your inventory for those moderate income households, some may even classify as workforce housing, that inventory is shrinking dramatically and making it tougher and tougher for folks to find affordable for sale housing. And this is just a demonstration of those median list price across the region, the highest being in the center part of the region. But virtually every county, it's well over 300 and close to $400,000 and higher. So some very high median list price. All right, just have a few slides left, and I think I've got a few minutes, so this should work out well. These are housing gap estimates. We did 2 of them. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this because this could get confusing. All you need to understand, and I'm glad to explain this to anybody who wants to contact me, but we looked at 3 different income levels based on what Dogwood had asked us to do. So that's those that are up to 50% of area median, between 51 and 80%, and those at 81 to 120% of median. We looked at renters, we looked at owners, we looked at general occupancy, but then we also parsed out those that are ages 55 and older. The time period that we looked at was from 2020 to 2025. The two scenarios we did was under North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, and that's the one I'm going to focus on here today because I think that's the more applicable number. We also ran numbers off of using HUD's methodology for determining housing gaps. So a lot of numbers on here. The big takeaway, again, the light blue is North Carolina format by every single county across the region, whether it's general occupancy numbers. These are the number of units needed to address housing issues. And again, that's a combination of new units needed as well as replacement of existing housing, additional units needed to get a balanced market. You don't have any vacancies. We need vacancies to have a healthy market. So that's factored in. But you can see the numbers are rather large in virtually every county across the region. About half of that demand is for housing for older adults, those age 55 and older. And so this is a great tool for not just Dogwood, but others out there, whether you're on a county government level, whether you're a developer, nonprofit group, and you're trying to figure out the depth of need. This report gets to that. One of the things I don't show here, but I do have it in the study, is we do break it out by the different affordability levels. So if you're focusing on housing that serves households up to 50% of median income, that number exists in the report, so you can see how deep that market is to understand how big of a project could you possibly put into this market. And there are a lot of nuances to what actually can be supported. These are macro county-wide level numbers, and so your project may be able to exceed market support if you're near a county border, if you're near an interstate highway, and can pull support from another area that's outside the county. So these are just used as guideposts for everybody to start thinking about priorities in terms of a housing need. And then we mapped everything under North Carolina format on the left, HUD's on the right. And no surprise, because these numbers are all based off of, the starting point is households. Well, the biggest areas will have the greatest households. They'll drive the greatest needs typically for additional housing units. So a lot of the housing need is, right in the Buncombe area or off the I-40 corridor or in the central portion of the region. And we went through the same exercise for owner households. The demand showed a need for over 3,000 general occupancy units. Of that, again, as a subset, 2,200 of those will be for older adults. And as I showed way back in the beginning of this presentation, you've got a lot of older adults. It's the biggest segment of your growth. And so that's driving the demand for older adult oriented housing. And then we mapped it as well. So again, higher concentration of people and households drive the higher demand. So I think it's my last slide, which should hit about my 45-minute mark. Just some quick thoughts. Again, I hope that if you're trying to pick areas of what's the big takeaways, well, hopefully I hit on some of those during the presentation, but nonetheless, availability, you clearly saw that there's really a limited availability in terms of housing, whether it's rental or for sale, most concentrated towards the lower income households. So affordability remains a problem, but even quality and condition of housing remains a challenge for the region. There's clearly an imbalance between what you have in terms of household product and its affordability level and those that can afford it. You saw that the folks that are most vulnerable, the working class, the working poor, have to work excessive hours to be able to afford housing. You saw the challenge of voucher use, whether it's just not a lot of properties accept them, but even if they do, there's just nothing available for the most part for people to even use those vouchers. Housing costs are outpacing income growth, and it's only adding to the demand, housing gap problems that are existing in the area. The positive, I leave you with, there's a lot of positives, but one of the best things that I learned from this, and we didn't cover it, was the stakeholder input that we got. And there's a lot of people out there that want to be part of the solution. And it's really from a broad spectrum of backgrounds, industries, and areas of expertise. So you've got this large network out there that is poised to address the housing issues for the area. And so that has me excited and hope that folks like Dogwood can kind of corral everybody together and start to address this, because like I believe Dr. Mims said right in the beginning, is not one foundation is going to solve this issue. The issue is too big. The geography is so large. And so you need a lot of folks to kind of pull together. But I think the resources in terms of entities that are ready and poised to do something, they're here to help. And I'll hit stop share and I'll turn it back to Dr. Mims. And you're muted, Dr. Mims.
I appreciate that. That, happens once in a while. So I just want to thank you so much, Patrick, for that really detailed and insightful presentation. As you said, I was glad you said that it won't take any one organization can't solve this. And I think that is definitely a theme, that the magnitude is really great. And I think it helps explain, that the data is always helpful to put numbers to what I'm sure most of you intuitively feel in your work and commitment and to this area, and really why we're here today. I also, recognize, I think it helps explain why my youngest patient couldn't brush her teeth. It just really puts the data behind it and helps point us in the direction we need to go, and emphasizes how much there is to do and how important this conversation is. So with that, I'd like to really open up this conversation and continue to put questions in the chat, and we will raise those up. I'd like to ask our Vice President of Impact for Housing, Sarah Grimes, who is helping to lead this work within Dogwood. We're so fortunate to have her and her long-term expertise in this area. And also Betsy Russell, our Senior Director of Communications. Thank you all for coming on screen. And we're going to work through some of the questions, try to get to as many as we can. And please keep the questions coming, because we'll try to get some answers, even if we can't get to them today. So let's see, Betsy, what do we have?
All right, we have several good questions. One comes from Erica Anderson, and she wants to know what the impact of that growing higher income demographic is going to do to the need for affordable workforce housing. And I'm going to kind of pair that with a question from Reverend Eric Reese out in Graham County, who talks about the fact that they have many second homes with higher income demographics, and wants to know if this second home ownership is factored into this work.
Yeah, we're seeing this all across the country, where most of the growth is among the moderate to higher income households. And certainly folks are taking up the inventory of the existing supply. And one of the things that's happening while the higher income households are coming into an area, and again, I showed you that actually that's not necessarily totally true for Western North Carolina, because you do have a lot of lower income people coming in, but you've got a lot of these higher income households that come in and they're taking up homes. Sometimes they're even their second homes. And so they're just going to move now where they've always vacationed. And so now they're going to live in Western North Carolina or wherever they seem to like to be. And I think a lot of the development community is identifying that as an opportunity. And so they're building to this base that is coming into the area that's higher income households. So sometimes I think it's distracting the development community to some degree to focus on where can they make the money. Now, with that said, one of the things we did not evaluate in your area, but we have evaluated in others, is developers aren't the bad guys. It's to many cases, the land cost, development costs, things like that are so high, and there's no exception in your area, that developers can't afford to build affordable housing. And so that's become a challenge, because I know a lot of them would like to participate in affordable residential development, but the development costs, land costs, lack of available housing, a lot of stuff that we got from your local stakeholders indicated, look, there's just lack of infrastructure or lack of assistance to do infrastructure. Those things are driving their cost up. They can't do affordable housing. So you have multiple things driving the demand for higher end product, and unless something changes locally, and again, we could talk about that at length, but there's a lot of things that are going to have to change locally to get developers to develop affordable housing.
Betsy, I think you're muted.
Always. We need a voice activated Zoom. Another question from Tiffany Henry, who wants to know how the data was studied maybe in relation to student populations in Western North Carolina, since we have several universities.
I thought I might get asked that question. Well, as probably many of you know, students are, for census data, demographic data, students are part of the population counts for wherever they live for the majority of the year. So they are in your numbers. There isn't a way for me to necessarily extract them out in terms of households by income level, because data for students doesn't exist. So I can't back them out. I know that obviously in Jackson County and maybe to a lesser degree, Buncombe County has the influence of the students. But even if I had the ability to take out younger households, which I could do, it just wouldn't be necessarily students, but I could remove those that are under the age of 25, for example, from the demographics. The numbers still are going to be large in terms of low-income households. So yes, traditionally low-income households are under age 25. Yes, students influence those numbers, but even if I remove them, the demand is still there for those that are over age 25 that are low income. The wait list still exists for those. Those aren't students on government subsidized or tax credit projects wait list. The wait lists are still significant. So all the metrics still point to, even if students weren't part of the factor, there's still a big demand for affordable housing beyond students.
Great, thank you. We have several questions coming in about short-term rentals, VRBOs, that kind of thing. Are they sort of included in non-conventional rental housing in your study? If they were identified as homes that weren't counted, would that change the numbers drastically? If they were, sort of how do they factor into all this data?
Good question. On this study, we didn't. I know we have done multiple studies in the Buncombe and surrounding areas on behalf of the city and the county and others that brought us in the past. For Dogwood study, we didn't get into that type of analysis in terms of, again, vacation rentals, second homes. I understand that is a big part of the market, and we have seen that in the past, but I can't answer that for this study. Especially if we did 18 counties, that would be a big undertaking. Could be done, but no, we didn't factor it in.
Great. And was there data included in this on people who might migrate into these counties, into our counties from work? So like maybe they live one county over from our region where there is some affordable housing, but then they commute in for work. Did we factor that in at all?
Yes and no. There is some commuting data in the report, but in the end, you've got so much crossover of people leaving one county to go to the next for daily work. If I were to study an individual county, somebody asked me just to study Henderson County, we could do a deep dive to understand every county that's contributing in terms of commuters into that county, and those that are in Henderson County, where are they going for work? How far do they go for work? We could factor all that in. But when you have 18 counties and there's everybody crossing over to each one, we did not factor in commuting patterns for a region-wide study like this, but it can be done on an individual county basis. Good question.
And what about manufactured housing? How does that sort of come into this? Is it based on whether it's rental or owned? Is it a non-traditional rental? Like how is that incorporated? Rental
or for sale, I guess. That clarify or. Yeah, we didn't study manufacturing home specifically, but any inventory we collected, whether it was the for sale supply, we didn't care what the product type was. We looked at what's available at what price point. So again, it could be an old home, traditional single family home. It could be a duplex, or it could be a manufactured home. If it's available to purchase, at what price point, and how many people are out there that can afford it. So it was accounted for, but not specifically parsed out. And same thing for the rentals. We wouldn't have singled out manufactured home versus a mobile home versus a unit over a storefront per se. And because again, you have so many types of rentals and for sale products. So we didn't get into product type specifics of inventory. And that's okay, because really in the end, we just need to understand what is available. And it's not much, particularly for the low income households. And that's the takeaway from the study.
Great, thank you. And just in your work, did you talk to any folks about sort of housing policy in the region? Did you get any key takeaways about that or observations about that?
No, again, that was outside the scope. I would say most times if we are doing a study on behalf of a municipality or county government, absolutely, we have those conversations. But this study, again, as I brought up in the beginning of the presentation, this was for Dogwood. And I'm sure Dogwood cares about policy of what county governments and municipalities are doing, but not for under this task. This was to try to start to identify what are the demographic characteristics, what are the housing inventory, where are we short, where, and again, I'm not speaking for Dogwood, I'm just concluding that that's what they want to use this report for. And that is, how do we prioritize our efforts? Is it certain income segments, product type, or geographically, which we show, right, county by county, where do we start our efforts? And so that's where the study was. We didn't touch on government policy. Other than we do have a part of the study, and I actually took it out of the presentation last minute today. We do have a section of the study that says by county, what programs are applicable to those counties, and show basically more rural counties have less opportunity for programmatic assistance, whether it's on the state or federal level. But beyond that, we didn't get into individual policies or tactics or strategies that governments could do.
Great, thank you. What about, maybe if you could speak a little bit more, there's some questions about older adults and how we help them as they either try to remain in place, or do they need rental housing? Like, can you speak a little bit more? You had them on a slide about sort of hard to house or challenging populations. And I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the findings for older adults.
One of the things that, I try not to give my personal opinion to communities when I'm doing my studies, but it's hard not to, in the sense of, one of my concerns is we don't, I think as a nation, don't talk about housing for seniors. And right, in fact, I think it's, I brought it up, I think Dr. Mintz brought it up, but you can attend a lot of events and hear people talk. A lot of folks are talking about the working class, and we should. But sometimes I think the seniors are the ones that kind of get forgotten. And one of my concerns nationally, but also even for Western North Carolina, is we've got this enormous aging population, and they're going to change, right? Their needs are going to change. Many of them will want to downsize because their kids are gone and they don't want to maintain, whether they can't physically maintain a home or financially maintain it. But sometimes at some point they're going to want to downsize. Then looking further down the road, and we didn't study this, and we can, but we didn't study supportive services, assisted living, nursing homes, and things like that. Mark my words, you're heading that way. We are heading that way as a nation, but Western North Carolina is no different. That we're going to run into a serious shortage of that type of housing, and because a lot of these seniors are not going to be able to take care of themselves. The last thing I'll add to senior housing is, we've got a lot of seniors staying in homes. Why? Well, they might want to be there because this is their house, it's their home they built or whatever it is, raised their family in. But even if they wanted to go somewhere, you just saw in the survey of rental and for sale housing, where do they go? There is no housing available to them, let alone the type of housing they might prefer. There are no choices. So I'm generally concerned about our senior population and what's going to happen, because if they stay in homes that they shouldn't stay in or can't maintain, you're going to start to see homes deteriorate and get deferred maintenance for one reason or another. And then you start having a housing quality issue. And it's no more than a reason seniors just couldn't take care of these homes.
Great. I think we have one more question that I see now, and that is, when you're talking to communities, and this could be governments or nonprofits or groups of people who are coming together who are interested in increasing affordable housing access, what are some of the key data points that they most often either overlook or need to, that could inform their work in a way that they may not be aware of?
Well, one of the things when we issue our reports and I do a presentation, one of the common comments I get back is, Mr. Bowen, you didn't tell us anything we didn't know. And that's not an insult to me. All we're doing is often confirming what they think is happening. Now, I probably pointed out a few things that showed perception of what people think might be happening is different than what we found as reality. But in the end, all we have done is really confirm and quantify how significant the need is for certain housing segments, particularly the lower income households. And so the study arms communities with at least that information. It allows elected officials to have that conversation with the public, right? Because a lot of folks do not want affordable housing in their community. I understand that. But at least if they start to see the data to say, look, we have a serious pent-up need. And if you tie that to economic, and I didn't, we could have a whole conversation on economic impact. but your employers, again, it's in the stakeholder survey that we did. When we talked to employers, and it's happening everywhere, but it's happening in Western North Carolina, employers are saying, we can't retain our employees. We can't attract employees. I think it was something like 80 or 90% of the employers said they're having a problem attracting employees. I know there's an employee shortage across the country, but even if there wasn't, there's a lot of people that can't even come into Western North Carolina because the housing isn't available. As I showed repeatedly through this presentation and in the report, there's nothing available for them to come to. And even employers are trying to think of ways to encourage, incentivize, raise the wages or whatever. There's just no housing available for them. So housing is an economic issue. And I think the local municipalities and county governments are starting to understand that. And the great news, I don't know if it's great news. The important thing is for all of us is employers are getting it now for the first time. They go, okay, housing is impacting us. So it's an economic issue as well.
Well, that's a great place, I think, for us to close out. And again, I want to thank you, Patrick, for being with us today. I also think your last comments really emphasize, take us back to the 4 strategic areas of Dogwood and how interrelated they are. I mean, you've touched on economics and education, and we know about health, and that housing is so core, which is why we wanted to get this information to begin to influence how we start the work. And this is really clearly just the beginning. So we hope you will download the report, explore it, share it with others, really create that conversation and share your ideas. I want to remind you that our goals and objectives are on our website now. They were newly put up, so you can see how you'll see how some of this data has helped drive those goals. And please reach out to us. You can talk to our housing team under Meet the Team, find the folks you need to talk to. And we are just so happy that you joined us today. Hope that everyone has a fantastic weekend. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.